Rev up your engines!
Well, yes, you can't say Scotty didn't predict it, but I did. Now, EVs are becoming even less practical because the supercharging rates are going through the roof. The price of electricity is going up. There is no kind of regulation on these supercharging when you want to charge your car fast. They can charge you whatever they want. There is no law that says you got to charge this, you can't charge this. They can charge whatever they want. And to me, it only makes total sense because what do these people think? Okay, first of all, do they really think that they can buy an expensive car and people are going to fill it with electricity cheaply? They're going to be like, hey, these clowns paid $80,000, $100,000 for their car. They're going to pay more money to charge it up here where we are. There's no rules. One place could charge one price, another place could charge twice as much per kilowatt hour. It makes no difference. There's no laws for it. So now the rates are going up through the roof, and of course, let's face it, it's a captive audience. They have these rich people in their electric cars by the short and curlies. They know you're driving around, you're driving through town, you're running out of power, you want to charge it up fast. Well, here we are. We're the convenient, fast supercharger, just like a convenient store. You want to buy a roll of paper towels. Don't go to the convenience store. It might be $4 or $5. Go to Amazon where you can get them for 99 cents, right? Or go to Walmart where it's cheaper. You're in a hurry. You're driving a car. It costs a lot of money. Don't think the people that are filling it up with electricity aren't going to stick it to you when you pull it in. Come on now, you know? What is this fantasy world? The real world is they're very expensive cars, and anybody who's going to have any dealing with them is going to charge a lot of money. The superchargers will charge a lot of money. If any of you have ever owned a Tesla and had to get it repaired, you know how much money they charge and how slow they are at actually fixing your car. Multiply this by 1,000-fold if people seriously all start driving around electric cars, and there's going to be one giant rat's nest, but it's going to be an expensive rat's nest, as they're showing now. The supercharger rates are going up the roof, and they probably will continue to. You got rich people in expensive cars. Do you think that people are going to give them a break? Why should they? They paid all that money for a car. They can pay a lot of money to fill it up with electricity too. And don't think the capitalist market isn't going to see that and do it. They already are. And this is before what, of course, would ultimately happen if people really switch to electric cars. You know what's going to happen? They're going to tax that. They're not really taxing the superchargers yet. They'll put a road tax on the electricity of the supercharger stations because when you buy gasoline, a bunch of that is a road tax to fix the roads. Well, if everybody's driving electric cars, the supercharger, it's high enough now with their charging. It'll be even higher because there'll be a government tax that you'll have to pay when you fill your car up with electricity at one of these. So don't think it's an economic savior. It's more an economic boondoggle. Dennis says, should I flush my automatic transmission fluid? My friend has a lovely car. He has not had a transmission flush 150,000 miles at Lexus. They said, you don't want to mess with it. Should I flush it? Never flush an automatic transmission. You put a machine on and you're flushing it through with fluid. That extra pressure, the pressure that's in the system isn't that much. You flush it. The pressure could actually get dirt to come off, but then jam it into holes. And there are so many tiny little holes inside the transmissions and shift modules and all kinds of valves and stuff. They'll often destroy it by flushing it. There's only one time I tell people, you want to try flush your transmission. That's when you got a piece of crap that won't even move. You put it in gear and it just sits there. Or it shifts, bang, bang. Then what the heck? It's falling apart. Try to flush it. Maybe you'll get a little more use out of it. You never know. I'm assuming from what you said, it's shifting fine now. I would just drop the pan. I'd change the fluid and filter. That's all I would do. That's not going to bother a Lexus, but flushing it can destroy it. Never, ever flush a transmission unless it's a junker and it's your last ditch effort at making it work without having to spend thousands rebuilding the thing. That's the only time you should ever try to flush a transmission. G. White says, my 2013 Hyundai Elantra timing chain keeps breaking. It's 150,000 miles. A year ago, the timing chain broke. I have had it replaced, but it broke 2 other times. The shop warrantied it, but he's wondering, why does it keep happening? It's recently starting to make noise again. I don't want to keep it, but the guy keeps fixing it for free. What should I do? One, the guy probably is either doing crap work or he's buying crap parts. If you change the timing chain, you got to change the tensioner to keep it tight. If you don't, and the rail that the tensioner pushes against the chain, you got to replace all that. Maybe he's not doing it. I don't know. I don't know the guy. You got to do engine work correctly. It's even if you're off a thousandth of an inch, it's going to screw up over time, and then they're going to break, right? The other thing is, they don't make very good engines. Hyundai, the Koreans, their engine making isn't that great. Look at all the problems they have with the burning oil, engines blowing up, starting on fire. You got 150,000 miles. If the mechanic is doing his job correctly, changing all those parts, and they're still breaking. And he's using OEM chain, OEM tensioner, OEM chain guide, all that stuff, right? And it keeps breaking. Then the engine itself is just worn out, which is typical. The timing chain goes on the crank, which spins around, and goes on the cams which spin around. If the cams are worn and they're wobbling, and I'm only talking a thousandth of an inch or so, or the crank is worn and it's wobbling, guess what? The chains are on the sprocket. The sprocket's wobbling. Now maybe it's only wobbling a thousandth of an inch or two, but that's enough. The chain will break after a period of time. So your whole engine's probably worn out, which is the reason I tell people, if you got a car with like that kind of mileage, a Korean car, they're not made that well to begin with. I would not rebuild them. I would put another engine in it, or I would get another car, because you're just putting a Band-Aid. The engine's worn, you're putting a timing chain on, the rest of the engine's worn, if the chain keeps breaking, it's telling you, hey, the rest of us are ready to blow soon too. I'd say, if the guy keeps replacing them, go right ahead, yeah? But he's eventually going to stop and say, I don't know, here's your money back, I quit, right? He should have explained to you that, hey, you know, your engine's worn internally, and obviously it's wobbling a little bit, thousandths, 2,000ths of an inch, and then it'll snap right off. Unless, of course, he's doing the job wrong. I don't know the guy, I can't say. Anthony says, my electric power steering feels heavy. My parents have a 15 Prius, and at low speeds it feels real heavy. It's doing it for a year, especially compared to how it was 7.5 years ago when it was new. Electronic power steering, there's no adjustments, everything's electronic, there's no maintenance, there's nothing. And when it starts to wear out, in the case of yours, you say at lower speeds, it's starting to wear. There's an electric motor that gives a boost is wearing, and at low speeds, it needs the most power. You're in stop, turn the wheel. You know, it's always a lot harder to turn when you're stopped than when you're moving. The faster you go, the less resistance, the rolling resistance there is to turning left and right, so you don't feel it. It's probably wearing. You'd probably want to live with it, because those things cost a small fortune. You know, I wouldn't bother as long as it feels safe. It's a little bit harder. Let's say you had a Toyota Corolla, an old one, that had power steering that was hydraulic. In that case, all you'd have to do is flush the system out. Dirt gets in it, and it doesn't work that good at low speeds, and you flush it out, and then you put new fluid in, and it often fixes it entirely. But there's no flush for electricity, so a lot of those things, you got to buy the whole rack. It's a very expensive thing. I would just live with it. It's not going to feel exactly the same. Look at the tires and everything. If they're wearing odd, then you got a suspension problem you'd have to fix. But if the tires are wearing perfectly fine and the suspension's good, it's just that the electric motor's worn somewhat. SB Focus says, should I trade my Focus in for an SUV? I got a 2016 hatchback, 65,000 miles. Should I get an SUV, or should I wait until the market gets better? Who knows if the market will get better? But I think the market will get better, because I think we're heading into, from what I read of all these economists, a rather large recession. And then the price of everything goes, I would wait. You only got 65,000 miles. And also realize, you got to focus. That thing is a gas miser. You go to an SUV, they're all gas hogs. So, you're going to be going from something that gets really good gas mileage to something that gets pretty crappy gas mileage. And the price of gas, let's face it, it's only going to be going up as time goes on. Historically, it's a limited commodity, and all the politicians are trying to blah, blah, go to electricity, so they'll keep making the price of gasoline go higher to try to force people to buy electric cars. If I were you, I would just hold pat with what you have. Maybe you'll find in a year or two the prices will come way down. I still wouldn't get an SUV. I'd get something smaller to get better gas mileage. Or if you want an SUV, get a small one that gets decent gas mileage. A Subaru Forester, the other guy, the guy brought it over. He was getting 35 miles a gallon on the highway with a 4-cylinder engine. Hey, he was happy with it. Maybe go to something like that. But I would not go to a big American one or a big Japanese one, because they get crappy gas mileage. And gas is going to get really expensive as time goes on. There's no arguing that. Big Country says, my 2012 Ford F-150 AC is not cooling. Pressure's 15 on the low and 150 on the high. It takes 30-40 minutes to equalize after shutdown. Expansion valve maybe? I would start there. For one reason. You said it takes 30 to 40 minutes for it to equalize. It should equalize pressure less than 5 minutes. When you shut off the system, then all the refrigerant should be the same pressure all around, maybe 80, 90 psi. If it takes that long to equalize, odds are expansion valve. Well, now, most of those don't have expansion valves. They have orifice tubes. If you have an expansion valve, yeah, but if it's an orifice tube, you could have a clogged orifice tube, or, unfortunately, a clog just about anywhere. You're only 15 low and 150 high. I would evacuate the entire system out. Take all the refrigerant out. Make sure there's no air in the system, so you'd run the vacuum pump for about an hour. When you get a vacuum in the system, believe it or not, it's kind of crazy. The vacuum creates pressure that makes the water boil. Turns into water vapor, and then it's sucked out by the pump. Then I'd fill it up with a factory load. That might fix the whole thing. You never know. That's where you always start, because no one knows. You can take pressure readings up the wazoo. If you don't know if it's got the correct amount of refrigerant, if you suck it all out, and then by so many grams. If it takes 900 grams, you put 900 grams back in. You know it's exactly filled. That might fix the whole thing. It often does. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.